Excuse me, just a little cough. Hey, everybody, Nevin Gusak, host of the Populist Patriot, and I'm doing this live stream because, as we all know, the possible overturning of Roe v. Wade is very imminent. And I wanted to take this moment to reveal my views on abortion. Now, when I was a conservative, your typical Reagan standard, Rush Limbaugh, then I joined the John Birch Society, conservative, I adhered to the view that abortion was terrible, that you were killing, that the mothers who chose to get an abortion, to abort their baby or abort the fetus, whatever you want to refer to it, was murder. And I accepted the whole conservative package of marrying free market libertarianism and globalism, that corporations generally cannot do wrong, with a muscular neoconservative foreign policy, free trade, and a sort of somewhat religious traditionalism that abortion is wrong and all the rest of it. But when I started to live life as an adult, when I started to meet people of differing backgrounds, when I started to do research, I slowly changed my views. I realized that I was an empathetic point of view. I realized that you cannot marry the ideology of a total free market, individualist-based society with preserving communities, with preserving families, etc. Because the ideology, the philosophy behind libertarian economic thought, of political plutocracy, of total laissez-faire, uncontrolled corporate capitalism where the employers can do whatever the hell they want, well, that is not a sentimental point of view. They don't care about families. They don't care about nations. They don't care about life. Everything about them is profit at all costs, even if it harms the community, even if it harms the national security of the United States, even if it harms life. And unfortunately, our culture is reinforced with that. We are a very capitalist, materialist culture. It permeates much of our entertainment, TV shows, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, hedonism, market hedonism, is a very important component of our common culture. And that has eroded a lot of sound values that used to be much more popular and well regarded. And this is particularly prevalent in the major urban areas as well as in suburbia. And that creates an environment to creating a dog-eat-dog United States. And when I started, I've met people who've had abortions. I've done research on it. Now, do I believe that men and women, both men and women, should be responsible with their partners when they make love and have sex? Yes. However, there are many, many issues at hand that force women or put women in the corner or families in a corner where they really have no viable choice but to get an abortion. And if you want to reduce abortions, which is what I would like to do personally, I'm not for banning abortions unless, of course, particularly, for example, if the mother's life is in danger. I mean, ideally, you want to save both lives, of course, the baby and the mother. But if you really want to reduce abortions, we have to have federal policies where the states and local governments are cooperating or made to cooperate, because I am a nationalist, first and foremost. I believe in order for our nation to survive and for the birth rate to increase again, you have to have a national policy for certain things. And what we need is a much more pro-natal policy. If we had a more pro-natal policy when it comes to labor, meaning labor law, stronger unions, more of a Medicare for all system, which takes the predatory private health insurance industry out of the equation and combines private practitioners of medicines, meaning private medical practices, with a national health insurance system, combined with a culture that's less based on solely capitalist, materialist, libertarianish ideology of dog eat dog and just the accumulation of material goods like it doesn't go out of style. If we move towards that, a culture that is more sentimental, that in business, in personal lives, that people are just not expendable and just throwaway, combined with a change in the mass culture, as well as a move towards a pronatal policy, which implies status economics, then yes, I believe we can then not only reduce abortions, but then banning abortions in certain circumstances can be much more politically tenable. Now, I'm going to read you some stuff from my book because I want all of you to kind of understand my point of view here. This is from Turning the Page, which is my book, my latest book set. Regarding social issues, radical civic nationalists rejects black and white arguments promoted by both the left and the right, meaning banning or permitting abortions, merely building more prisons and hiring more police, etc. We view social maladies as symptoms of living in a deeply flawed social, economic, political system in the U.S. As radical civic nationalists, while we despise the proliferation of abortion and strongly support the expansion of traditional nuclear families, we take a different approach than many establishment conservatives posing as, quote, traditionalists. Radical civic nationalists seek to address the root causes of the decline of the American family, our birth rate, and the increase in abortions performed in the U.S. First, we must recognize that many conservatives and libertarians, even ones that are religious Christians, pledge a fealty to an economic structure which discourages the birth rate, breaks apart families, and allows abortions to be a viable choice for financially strapped working families. Many of these same conservatives despise the concept of access to quality health care by all Americans, which would most certainly be a pro-life policy. At least some conservatives and populists called out the hypocrisy of the American right's supposed fealty to, quote, family values. The maintenance of the American family requires a strong ethic of individual responsibility and a strong state that would nurture the development of the family through stakeholder capitalism, which would focus on employment security, a positive economic nationalism, and a healthcare system which encourages an increased birth rate, preventative medicine, exercise, etc. All these measures would solidify the American family, reduce the need for abortions, and increase the birth rate. Dissident conservative critics highlighted the contradiction between the professed pro-family values of the establishment right versus their adherence to trickle-down economics, which is devoid of any sentiments outside of greed. A brilliant reader comment republished as an article for the American Conservative queried, fellow pronatal evangelical Christians, how can we realistically plan ahead for a family when our jobs have no assurance of being there the next day, let alone the next month, and we lost health coverage to have a baby if we're laid off, and even with our good health insurance, we could be bankrupted by even a slightly complicated pregnancy. And once again, the conservative pro-family Republicans are as bad or worse than the dissolute liberals amongst the Democrats in pushing policies and attitudes that are extremely antenatal. For example, after my cousin's terrible luck with the bankrupting birth of his first child and the insurance company's corruption, he tried to ask for help from his fairly conservative community, or at least understanding for his predicament. Instead, he and his wife were mocked as being scroungers and welfare losers when he had to go on food stamps for a while, even though he supposedly did everything right with a good job, good health insurance, law abiding. Nope. The conservative, up by the bootstraps attitude in his town full of Fox News watchers and Rush Limbaugh worshippers was full of vitriol and contempt by pro family conservatives, saying that he should have saved up more or should have been more careful before having their first kid, even though he did utterly everything a reasonable person would be expected to do. And that gives you an idea of what the problem is. Okay? This is the issue. These are the attitudes of the establishment right, or really much of the right, because the anti-establishment right, other than certain exceptions, and the establishment right, your Tea Party right, your Trump right, unfortunately, and your Bush-Reagan right, they're all basically the same shit in a different, same shit in different toilets, essentially. How do you like that? Same shit, different toilets. And that's what it comes down to. And those attitudes need to be eviscerated. And there needs to be a mass political movement that needs to somehow form that's going to jettison these attitudes, to consider this hyper-individualistic, greed-centered, self-righteous, smug, arrogant, shithead attitude needs to be eviscerated. Because you can't have a proper radical civic nationalism when all you are just a bunch of hyper-individualistic assholes. That's what it comes down to, bro. That's what it comes down to here. Can't move forward with that. You think we could have a hyper-individualistic society and then meet the threat of Russia and China? Forget it. The ideas of hyper-individualism really brought us trade with China and Russia, even during the Cold War. Trade with Nazi Germany. Oh, it's my company. I can do whatever I want. It's my rights. My rights. The next person that says my rights, I want to strangle them. Okay? As Arthur Schlesinger Jr. said in The Vital Center in his book, we have to have a society that does not, an individualism that doesn't wall man and woman off from community, and a sense of community that doesn't smother individualism. And there are going to be cases where the crybabies that say, my rights, oh, it's my property, my this, my that, me. Well, no, sometimes we have to subordinate ourselves to the we, to the community, to the nation state, in order for us to survive. It's not the Wild West little house on the prairie anymore. It's a different country, and it has been for decades upon decades. And it's about time we start acting like a modern nation state. So anyways, Samuel T. Francis, who is a dissident conservative, and he later kind of flirted with racially oriented populism. But to be honest with you, he was right on certain things. Samuel T. Francis correctly observed that the American rights, solidarist invocations of nation, family, community, and cultural tradition are fundamentally at odds with its attachments to an abstract individuality and a cosmopolitan market that refuses to discriminate against the color of money. Julius Krein of American Affairs, the editor, he said that it's increasingly clear that if you want to have a classical social conservative kind of family, then people also need to be able to make a living. If your economic model is having both parents working 18-hour days, that's not really a pro-family policy. Left-wing political scientist Sheldon Wolin wrote, cultural wars might seem an indication of strong political involvements. Actually, they are a substitute. The notoriety they receive from the media and from politicians eager to take firm stands on non-substantive issues serves to distract attention and contribute to a cant of politics of the inconsequential. And they ignore really the deep structural flaws that are afflicting American society. And I know I'm going to probably piss off a lot of conservatives who are listening to this. Guys, this program is called The Populist Patriot, okay? I'm not pretending to be a conservative here. I am not a conservative by Reagan standards, not even John Birch Society standards. None of that. Okay? So again, I want to make that clear. And guys, it doesn't make me a Nazi. It doesn't make me a communist. It doesn't make me an adherent of totalitarian versions of socialism. But I'm also not an adherent of plutocracy. And I'm not an adherent of unregulated or poorly regulated corporate runaway capitalism either. So, anyways, let's continue. There's some history. These culture war issues like abortion started in at least the 1980s. The culture war, I'm reading from my book, the culture war, according to Republican pollster Fred Steeper, quote, gets us a lower end vote that we couldn't get on just economic issues. In a memo for the 1984 Reagan campaign, Lee Atwater implicitly admitted the failure of trickle-down economics as a selling point for GOP candidates. And he wrote, so long as the crucial issues were generally confined to economics, as during the New Deal, the liberal candidate would expect to get the most of the populist vote. But populists are conservatives on most social issues. When social and cultural issues died down, the populists were left with no compelling reason to vote Republican. There you go. There you go. Hello, Democrats. If you want to run people, Democrats, that are actually going to win in the South and the Midwest, that have any chance in Chinatown, the way to do it is with social conservatism, even moderate social conservatism with straight economic populism, and you will win. And if you expose the Republicans, these Reagan Tea Party Republicans, as intellectually inconsistent frauds on social issues, economics, and national security, you will win. Hello? Anybody listening? I got 547 subscribers. There's got to be some Democratic and labor union oriented operatives and adherents here that can spread the message, and the urban areas can have their combination of labor populism and, more of a centrist or liberal social policy. Hello, and hello, Brandon, the latest reader of my book. How you doing? Thank you for listening. So, anyways, I kind of get that off my chest. So, and this strategy worked of ignoring or peddling trickle-down economics, laissez-faire liberalism with social conservatism. It's the whole God, guns, and gays strategy. So I'm kind of reading from my book here. So, continue to read. As our government, under the strong influence of the financial services industry, multinational corporations, or right-wing neoliberal globalists, implemented their economic agenda, the average American nuclear family experienced stress and dislocation. When families lack the financial resources to sustain their basic needs, they experience stress, dysfunction, and even divorce. The abortion rate increases and the birth rates decline because families and individuals cannot afford to raise children. Chris Hedges wrote in May 2019, quote, the birth rate decline is an indicator of the despair and hopelessness that define the lives of tens of millions of young Americans who struggle financially and see little hope for the future. This state of affairs is reflective of our increasingly unjust, ultimately unsustainable economic system where more and more employees are underpaid and overworked. Since the 1980s, many housewives were compelled to work in order to maintain a middle-class lifestyle for their families. This phenomenon was juxtaposed with the unraveling of the system of stakeholder capitalism, which made the sustenance of the traditional American family possible. Hence, uncontrolled laissez-faire capitalism with its deregulation and open borders are not conducive to the promotion of traditional families and the positive aspects of the social conservative agenda. Libertarian free market fundamentalism lacks any fealty to collective projects, such as the family and nation, and instead fetishizes untrammeled individualism, thus producing an extreme atomism. Modern fusionist conservatism of the post-1945 period became an ideological patchwork of competing values. As Julius Krein observed, the fusion of cultural traditionalism and market freedom is rarely realized in Tocquevillian civic virtue, but it frequently cashes out in a vicious combination of economic egotism and culture war outrage. Hence, modern conservatism infused with rootless libertarian economics became an ineffective force to rebuild a cohesive nation and encourage the expansion of nuclear families. Let me just take a drink here. And in my book, Turning the Page, Volume 2, in this chapter, I go over just a massive amount of statistics on how trickle-down economics has hurt the American family. But let's go to abortion. Now, my position on abortion, I despise abortion. I don't like that abortion is occurring in the United States. I'm not one of these people that believes that, that pretends abortion is, oh my God, it's his human rights, and they make their political identity about it. On the other hand, I don't align myself with the right-wing conservatives who, like Ben Shapiro, for example, who believes that we should have a strict prohibition of most abortions, but yet at the same time, people like Shapiro adhere to an extremely anti-natalist economic policy. So I kind of steer a middle ground where I want to enact policies that will really reduce the need for women of good nature and good faith and families to have to pursue an abortion to begin with. I want to make the ability to get an abortion the choice of absolute last resort. So I'm just scrolling down here because I really recommend if you want to purchase my book, and you want to read just the chapter on abortion and the destruction of family life in America, what you could do is buy volume 2 on Amazon.com. I mean, I recommend you buy both volumes, but definitely purchase it on Amazon.com, volume 2, and you'll see my chapter there. Okay, so okay. Let's okay, to reduce the abortion rate, because I have a solution section on rebuilding our social structure here. Hey, 21st Century Longest, sup? What's going on? How's it going? Yes, we need a Huey Long desperately. It's not going to take any shit. It's going to rain the hammer down on all these national problems here. To reduce the abortion rate, we will roll back, this meaning my version of radical civic nationalists. If I were president and I had the radical civic nationalist party, took the Supreme Court, both houses of Congress, all the state legislatures, city governments, and the presidency, this is what I would do on abortion. To reduce the abortion rate, we will roll back virtually all forms of deregulation, abolish right to work, and reindustrialize the U.S. Financial stress, which results in no small part from conservative libertarian economic policies, is one of the biggest factors which motivate people to terminate their pregnancies through abortion. This is backed up by statistics. According to the Alan Guttmacher Institute, 21% of women having an abortion could not afford having a baby. In 2004, the figure rose to 23%. Another study by the University of California, San Francisco, data from 2013 indicated that 40% of women had abortions due to financial issues. A 2005 study conducted by researchers at the Guttmacher Institute found that 73% of women who had abortions said that they could not afford a child at the time, while 74% stated having a child would interfere with education, work, or ability to care for dependents. So we have a government of action of civic nationalist and populist principles will need to then have policies that will allow these women to both have these children. If it's an oops pregnancy, if God forbid they were raped and for whatever reason they would want to bear these children, and they're going in school, things of no fault of their own, oops pregnancies, things happen, And if they want to have these kids, they should be encouraged to do so because all life is precious. I get that argument. So make sure we help them out with education, help them out with work, help them out with care. Because let me tell you, the conservatives out there are going to be like, well, what about the families? Oh, they shouldn't have done this and shouldn't have done that. And oh my God, they made their poor life choices. But hello, we're not living in this world. Stop with the, I can't stand people when they say, oh, you should have, could have, but didn't. Okay, the problem is in front of us. Stop bitching about we should have, could have, didn't, whatever, and let's solve the problem at hand. You're grousing about, oh my God, how babies are precious and everything, and all life is precious, and we need people to get back into the workforce, and you're all saying that people are lazy. Okay, it's not going to happen just by the chaotic principles of some imaginary free market dystopia. It's going to happen with a government that is active at times in cooperation with the private sector, in cooperation with a new mass culture where, yes, where it is a much more healthier balance between the needs of the community and the nation, while protecting the notion of individualism and still highlighting the importance of self-responsibility. So that's where I'm at on that. But I continue. There is more. Okay. A study from 2013 also revealed similar conclusions. 40% claimed that they underwent an abortion because they could not afford a child. 12% claimed they could not provide a better life for a child, and 36% believed it was not the right time to have a child. According to a Gallup poll, a vast majority of poorer Americans, Republican and Democrat, were overwhelmingly pro-life. That's important. We believe that the destruction of the trickle-down, anti-labor, globalist form of corporate capitalism would improve economic circumstances for poor middle-class would-be parents, which in turn would lower the rate of abortions. To reduce the abortion rate, a radical civic nationalist government will make birth control accessible on a mass level. While we would promote abstinence and responsibility, radical civic nationalists are realists. We do not expect that younger or unmarried people to cease having sexual intercourse. Human beings naturally love to be intimate for procreation and pleasure. It is a simple fact of life, and it is difficult to lock this biological imperative back in a conservative box. In our eyes, abortion is a greater evil than premarital sex. Hence, expanded access to birth control will be a logical option. However, according to a study conducted by Dr. Jeffrey Piepert of Washington University in St. Louis, of 9,000 poor, uninsured women in St. Louis, access to free birth control, IUDs, and implants lowered the number of unintended pregnancies and abortions. There were 4.4 to 7.5 abortions per 1,000 women in the study who had access to the free birth control, as compared to the overall total of 13.4 to 17 abortions per 1,000 women overall in the St. Louis region. This was lower than the national rate, which consisted of almost 20 abortions per 1,000 women. Alina Salganikoff, director of women's health policy at the Kaiser Family Foundation, concluded, as a society, we want to reduce unintended pregnancies and abortion rates. This study has demonstrated that having access to no-cost contraception helps us to get to that goal. An estimated 43% of unintended pregnancies end in abortion. According to a 2012 Brookings Institution, more than 90% of abortions occur due to unintended pregnancy. Access to lower no-cost birth control will lower the number of unwanted pregnancies and abortions. Free and expanded access to birth control also saves the taxpayer money. Birth control subsidies for IUDs and implants offer savings to taxpayers, since every 1 million unintended births costs taxpayers $11 billion each year. And I think we have to take these things seriously. I know this is not what Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh and Ben Shapiro and all these reactionary so-called conservatives, that all they want to conserve is just the wealth of private sector oligarchs. That's the only thing they really want to conserve. That's the only thing they care about. God forbid we have programs that raise the taxes of their precious job creators. I'm not talking about small businessmen and small and medium-sized businesses that are rooted in the community. I'm not even talking about the large companies that are loyal and patriotic to the United States of America. I'm excluding those people. Those guys and ladies have my utmost sympathy, and I want to do everything to encourage those businesses that are rooted in the community. I'm talking about the Jeff Bezos. I'm talking about the Elon Musk. Yeah, I said it. Not a fan of Elon Musk necessarily. He's a manufacturer, so he gets props for that. But he also is a huge supporter of communist China, by the way. You know, I think nowadays the conservatives are like Sebastian Gorka and others who are, you know, just fellatiating over Musk are, you know, forgetting the fact that he's praised Chinese society as opposed to the lazy American workforce and the Chinese communist slave labor camp that it is essentially. So yeah, people like Elon Musk, people like Jeff Bezos, people like the Kochs, you know, the agricultural employers that employ undocumented slave immigrant labor, whether are documented or undocumented, you know, you name it, the BlackRock, all those people, those companies, I'll gladly raise their taxes on them to pay for actually things that are good for the community. And that includes forcing them to give up more money, because you know what, they help legitimize in a major way our geopolitical enemies, and they need to pay war taxes. They need to pay something called the national defense tax, and a major one. I'm not saying I want to put them out of business, but they need to start ponying up a little bit more. So anyway, yeah, so I said it. These birth control things, it's the studies. What do you want? You can't have a million things. We want lower abortions. You're going to have to modify your views according to actually what works, even though morally or socially you might not be comfortable, but which is worse? Having low cost or free contraception that's available, combined with teaching abstinence, or do you want to just have proliferation abortions? To me, you're not gonna stop people from having sex. Okay, we all like to do it. Many people, it's a biological imperative. We feel connected to a partner. We want to have families. It's a biological urge. Many women and men share it. Some don't. That's their choice, but others do. And we need to make it hospitable to have families. And God forbid, if somebody makes a wrong, quote, a wrong decision, or let's say an unintended situation, a condom breaks, they're raped, God forbid, and there are women that who are rape victims who want to keep their children. These people should be held in high esteem. It's a painful thing too, psychologically, to have a rape. And unfortunately, I have known people, one person, I'm not going to name who it is, who was raped in this person's home country. And it's very painful to hear. And you do have women that would want to keep the baby. And when you're raped, that changes, it damages you. The person in question is an extraordinarily resilient individual and has gotten through it, and, you know, is a wonderful mother and is an extraordinary person and is successful. But these people should be helped. You know, we have to look at our fellow citizens as fellow citizens. I don't want to say the word comrades because that has a negative connotation, but we have to look at them as our family to a degree. And that's going to come through changing our culture. And the only way to do it is a mass movement. We have to replicate somehow. If there's some billionaires out there This is the kind of movement that needs to be built. We have to plagiarize and copy what the reactionary conservatives and the globalists and the labor haters are doing, the Koch network and the Wall Street nexus, and they're dumping money into corporate Democrats and extreme libertarian and neoconservative so-called grassroots organizations. People like me, we need to have a whole stable of activists. We need to have our people everywhere in all walks of life so we could affect opinion, have our own news channel, and everything else. 21st century longest. What are your thoughts on taxation, progressive or flat tax? I did a show early last year, I think, if I recall, on that, but real quick answer, definitely oppose the flat tax. Anything that comes out of the trickle-down crowd like Steve Forbes, who was one of the popularizers of the flat tax, I don't trust. It's an anti-populist position. 14% of a wealthy person's income versus 14% of an individual who's working class or middle class or small business person, to me, is unjust. It's unfair. What I would like to see is my taxation plan. My taxation motto is simple. It's very non-ideological: as low as possible and as high as needed. And with that, I would have reinstitute progressively over the period of, let's say, 5 years, a 25% tariff rate across the board, combined with a sales tax on certain luxury items purchased by the super wealthy. I would actually make our tax policy more progressive than it is. I would roll back all of the so-called tax cuts, which have disproportionately benefited globalist multimillionaires and globalist billionaires, with an emphasis in financial services and multinational corporations. I would definitely raise their taxes on all fronts. And I think that would be about it. I would also raise estate and wealth taxes, Wall Street transaction taxes too, as well. The groupings that would be affected most by my tax plan would be, again, the multinational corporation executives and the hedge funds and other large financial services industries that are basically predicated on speculation. My tax plan would not be predicated on merely raising revenue, but there would be an added aspect of my tax plan, which would be to discourage certain economic activities that would incentivize production and real research and development within the framework of private enterprise, and discourage what is popularly known as the casino economy or extreme financial speculation, minus typical commercial banks. I strongly in favor of private commercial banking. But when it comes to so-called investment banking, I would take a much more harder look at that. So yeah, it would be a progressive tax based on wealth and income. I would tend to give major tax benefits to the poor, to the working class, to the middle class. The tax policy would encourage domestic investment in industry, research and development, agriculture, and mining. It would also encourage home ownership more. I would also give tax deduction to fathers paying child support. I think that is grossly unfair that fathers who pay their child support responsibly or on time do not get some sort of benefit. I think that's wrong. And I think, the mothers being paid the child support, that should remain tax-free for the responsible mothers. It should be equal in both ways to make co-parenting truly desirable. I would also, my reasoning for that is for the lowering the taxes truly for small businesses, for medium-sized businesses, and to encourage production and for working class and poor and middle class families. Um, the reason why I would do that is simply more of us. We're putting more money in the economy than merely just Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the Walmarts, the Targets, and others would not basically survive without the masses of consumers and laborers. There are more of us than them. I would also tax corporations that move American jobs overseas. I would subject those products and services to a very heavy tariff, at least of 50%. Um, I would also reinstitute things that were taken away by the Reagan tax so-called reform of 1986, like the manufacturing investment tax credit that used to exist, and others that have really penalized American production. So that's what I take a look at. So I guess that's a kind of a long answer, but thank you for the question, 21st century longest. Okay. Anyways, let's get back to abortion. Let's see. Okay, so um, okay. Okay, here we go. We will abolish right to work, slowly reverse extreme globalization, and reverse virtually all major deregulations over the past 40 years. This alone will provide families with the disposable income to raise their children and provide them with the best life possible. As Jeff Spross wrote, quote, conservative trumpeted values are much easier to practice when people have access to bourgeoisie wages and job security, meaning middle class wages and job security. Unions provide that access. So the larger the union movement, the more stable bourgeoisie you will have in this country. Hello, conservatives. You want to prevent class polarization, the appeal of Marxism. Time to shit can right to work. Your adherence to them. Okay? Get rid of right to work. As long as you have non-communist, social democratic oriented unions that are patriotic, you're going to have stronger bourgeoisie in this country. And isn't that what you want? Stronger middle class and more wealthier people and more social mobility? Will will the conservatives listen to me? No, because they're too big, sucking at the I don't want to say the word. I could say the teat or the breast of the Koch brothers, or the one remaining Koch brother, and all the other globalist and anti-national corporations. At the Family Studies blog, Anna Sutherland recently reported on a study authored by Daniel Schneider and Adam Reich, which found that union membership for men, quote, is positively and significantly associated with marriage. Ooh, so those horrible commie unions, they actually are fulfilling conservative purpose, conservative goals. Wow. According to conservative writer William R. Hawkins, quote, conservatives who are concerned with the work ethic and social order must be concerned with unemployment. Would it not be better, if it comes to this, to subsidize employment through an industrial policy rather than subsidize unemployment through a welfare system? Gee, I wonder. I guess the libertarian answer is not the answer, according to these conservatives. Economic nationalist policies, along with stakeholder capitalism, will restore this traditional social order in the U.S. People will be bonded to their community, businesses, and other institutions. A system of reciprocity will develop again, and the financial stability needed by families would create an atmosphere favorable to procreation. We conclude this point by quoting Chris Hedges, who accurately pointed out in May 2019, only by addressing this financial insecurity and desperation, by integrating back into society those who have been pushed aside, can the nation's death spiral be reversed. There you go. There you go. So you want to stop abortion? I just provided some of the solutions. There's more that I discuss in my book. There's a lot more. But these judges on the court, these so-called conservatives, are from the Federalist Society. Thomas, Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett. They're all creatures of the Federalist Society. And all the Federalist Society is a corporation-funded project. I mean, even the so-called liberal left woke corporations like Facebook and Google fund the Federalist Society. Left and right don't matter. It's all about preserving their class privileges and the wealth of the private sector oligarchs. And that's why the Trump revolution, which was hijacked, and those horrible, most of them being horrible Republicans that claim the Trump mantle, got these judges through so they can continue to solidify plutocracy, to solidify and destroy any initiative to create anything that is remotely pro-natal. So you can't ban in good conscience or good faith, you can't ban and fuck over individuals and families through no fault of their own. You can't ban abortions and balance it with a anti-natal economic and social policy. You cannot do that. There is no compelling argument for that formula. And that is why I am against the repeal of Roe v. Wade. It's one thing if we repeal Roe v. Wade, if we had a much more extremely pro-natal policy, a truly pro-life policy, both prenatal and postnatal. But we do not do that now. And it will kill the so-called conservative cause by having, once again, these Federalist Society judges solidifying the oligarchy with democratic trappings that we have in this country. And the only way we can truly reduce abortions in this country is spearhead a mass culture that is not predicated on laissez-faire individualism and materialism and dog-eat-dog and Lord of the Flies. Combined with that, we have to have a new mass movement-based political party that will build truly pro-natal policy. That is my opinion. I told you, other than a few populist Democrats like Richard Ojeda and a few of the people associated with the National Conservatism Conference crowd that I attended in Orlando, Kissimmee, Florida, back in, October, November 2021. Most of the conservatives are not going to talk about this. They're going to think I'm a freaking socialist. Oh, Nevin, you're a socialist. You know what? I don't care. Because you know what? At this point, labels don't mean diddly squat. We have to do what's right and what's necessary to ensure the survival of our nation and our country. And thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Josie Wales. I'm fine. Either contraception by all means. Appreciate that, Josie. Appreciate Brendan, Josie, and 21st Century Longest for listening. I'm going to try and squeeze in some more. This live stream took a lot longer than I thought. Yeah, you too. Take care and peace. 21st Century Longest. At this point, also, in order to get the message out, if any of you who are listening either now or in the future will listen to this particular live stream, please, if you know people who have other YouTube channels where our positions are even somewhat similar, reach out to them. Feel free to invite me on. I obviously do it for free. No problem with that if that's an issue. It's important for like minds to network. Our political adversaries, the reactionary so-called right-wing globalists and labor haters, and the communists and national socialist totalitarians, they have their own networks. We need to have a true third way, or I would say fourth way. No, I'm not plagiarizing Alexander Dugin. I just consider myself totally politically homeless. I can't fit in National Socialists or fascists, can't fit in with communists, and I can't fit in with corporate Democrats and most of your Republican Tea Party Reagan types. So that's why there's going to be a fourth way, and that's this position. Think of Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt in certain ways, a little bit of Jesse Helms, some old school late 19th century, early 20th century labor-oriented populism, bits and pieces of Dwight D. Eisenhower Republican Party stuff. Look at the 1956 Republican Party platform, for example. Throw that in and you'll pretty much, also I forgot, American School for Political Economy, Henry Carey, Abraham Lincoln, for example, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington. You'll get pretty much my political views, just those views on steroids. Because I'm kind of become, for over a year or so, let the cat out of the bag. I'm a wee bit disenchanted with laissez-faire liberalism, both in the political and economic sense. And I hate to plagiarize Caleb Maupin, bright guy. Politically and basically totally opposed to what he wants to build in this country and the countries governments he chooses to align himself with. But I like some of his phrases, and his critiques of neoliberalism is sound. Maupin calls for a government of action, and I think we need a government of action on all fronts. Doesn't have to be a communist government, doesn't have to be a fascist government, but really and truly, we need a government of action based on the principles of radical civic nationalism and populism. Thank you all. Have a great evening. And God